The gray skies of Seattle mirrored the storm in Walter Emerson's mind. At 26, Walter was struggling to keep his head above water, balancing law school, 2 part-time jobs, and the mountain of medical bills left after his father's passing. The rain pelted his jacket as he hurried through the city, dodging puddles and cars splashing through the streets. His head throbbed with stress, his thoughts a tangled web of deadlines and worries. The call came unexpectedly. His phone vibrated in his pocket as he waited at a crosswalk, the screen glowing with an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Walter Emerson? The voice was crisp, confident, and unfamiliar. Yes, who is this? He asked cautiously, his fingers tightening around the phone. This is Margaret Hawthorne. I need to speak with you. Meet me at Canterbury Cafe, 7 p.m. sharp. It concerns your financial situation. Confused, Walter frowned. I'm sorry, who are you? How do you know about? I'll explain everything in person, Margaret interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. Do not be late. The line went dead. Walter stared at his phone, the words financial situation echoing in his mind. Who was this Margaret Hawthorne? And how did she know about his struggles? Part of him wanted to ignore the meeting, but desperation nudged him forward. If there was even a chance she could help, he couldn't afford to refuse. At 7 p.m. sharp, Walter entered Canterbury Cafe, shaking raindrops from his umbrella. The cozy, warmly lit space smelled of fresh coffee and pastries. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her, Margaret Hawthorne. She sat at a corner table, poised and commanding, with silver hair styled elegantly and an aura of wealth that seemed to cloak her. Mr. Emerson, she said, gesturing for him to sit. Her voice was steady, her demeanor calm, yet authoritative. Thank you for coming. Walter hesitated, then took the seat across from her. You're Margaret Hawthorne. Why did you ask me here? Margaret's piercing blue eyes met his, and a faint smile touched her lips. I'll get straight to the point. I know of your debts and the struggles your family faces. I'm here with an offer. Marry me, and I'll resolve them. Walter nearly choked on his coffee. Excuse me? It's a business arrangement, Margaret clarified, sipping her tea. I require a companion, someone trustworthy, to stabilize my legacy. In exchange, your financial burdens will disappear. Her words hung in the air, surreal and heavy. Walter stared at her, searching for signs of a joke, but her expression remained composed. This is insane, he muttered. Why me? You're young, unattached, and desperate enough to consider it, Margaret said matter-of-factly. Think of it as a contract. Stunned, Walter left the meeting unsure of how to proceed. His family's needs loomed large, but the terms felt surreal. His mother's frail voice echoed in his mind. Sometimes, Walter, the right choice isn't easy. It's necessary. 7 days later, Walter and Margaret stood in a quiet courtroom exchanging vows. The ceremony was brief, witnessed only by Margaret's lawyer and a notary. As the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Walter's chest tightened. The arrangement was straightforward on paper, a marriage of convenience. Yet it unsettled him deeply. Margaret's unwavering composure, her eyes glinting with a mix of triumph and mystery, sent shivers down his spine. Afterward, they rode in silence to the Hawthorne estate. Walter had seen glimpses of wealth before, but nothing prepared him for the sprawling mansion that awaited. The grand facade, with its towering columns and manicured gardens, seemed to watch him with judgment. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with the scent of polished wood and aged books. Each room was a masterpiece of opulence, crystal chandeliers, intricate tapestries, and antique furniture that seemed to whisper of bygone eras. Yet, beneath the grandeur lay an unsettling quiet. Walter noticed the locked doors, their brass handles gleaming ominously. When he asked Margaret about them, she smiled faintly. Some things are better left undisturbed, she replied, her tone final. The days that followed were surreal. Walter was treated like an honored guest rather than a husband. Meals were served in silence, prepared by a staff who avoided eye contact. Margaret remained cordial but distant, her demeanor measured and cryptic. On the third evening, she broke the silence during dinner. Walter, you're part of something greater now, she said, her gaze piercing. In time, you'll understand why I chose you. Walter's unease grew with each passing day. Whispers among the staff only deepened his anxiety. He often overheard fragments of conversations. Does he even know? He'll figure it out eventually. One night, unable to sleep, Walter wandered the halls. The dim lighting cast eerie shadows, and the creak of the floorboards beneath his feet echoed ominously. He paused outside one of the locked doors, his curiosity burning. What was Margaret hiding? Before he could dwell further, a voice startled him. Exploring so soon? Margaret's voice was calm, yet carried an edge. She stood at the end of the hallway, her silhouette sharp against the dim light. I couldn't sleep, Walter stammered. Margaret stepped closer, her expression unreadable. Curiosity can be dangerous, Walter. Some doors should remain closed. Walter nodded, retreating to his room, but the seeds of doubt had already taken root. The mansion's opulence now felt like a gilded cage. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, tested. In the following days, Margaret's remarks grew more cryptic. You'll soon understand, she repeated, her words more a warning than a reassurance. Walter's mind churned with questions. Why had she chosen him? What secrets lay behind those locked doors? And, more importantly, what had he truly agreed to when he said, I do? Walter couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret's mansion hid more than just fine art and antique furniture. The whispers of the staff, the cryptic remarks, and her guarded demeanor gnawed at him. One morning, while Margaret attended a meeting outside the estate, Walter found himself standing in her study. His eyes swept over the pristine desk, its surface an island of order in a sea of questions. That's when he saw it, a small ornate key, partially hidden beneath a leather-bound planner. It was heavier than he expected, its intricate design hinting at age and importance. His pulse quickened as he slipped it into his pocket, his mind racing with possibilities. The key fit the lock of one of the mysterious doors in the east wing. Walter's hands trembled as he turned it, the soft click of the mechanism sounding deafening in the stillness. Slowly, he pushed the door open. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through cracked blinds, illuminating a room frozen in time. The walls were lined with shelves filled with faded photographs, old contracts, and yellowed letters. A large oak desk stood at the center, its surface cluttered with papers and a diary with Margaret's initials embossed on the cover. Walter's curiosity burned as he flipped through the documents. Each page revealed more of Margaret's past. Failed business deals, accusations of fraud, and scathing letters directed at his late father. One letter stopped him cold. It read, John Emerson, you've left us with nothing. My family's ruin is on your hands. You stole everything. Our fortune, our stability, and my husband's health. I will see to it that your legacy pays for your sins. Walter's breath hitched. Beneath the letter lay Margaret's diary. Hesitating only a moment, he opened it. The entries were chilling, detailing her plan to entangle him in a marriage that would ensure her revenge. Walter Emerson is my final move. With him under my control, I'll reclaim what was stolen and destroy what remains of his father's name. A soft creak behind him made his blood run cold. He turned to see Margaret standing in the doorway, her face shadowed, but her eyes gleaming with icy determination. Finding what you were looking for, Walter? She asked, her voice deceptively calm. Walter's jaw tightened. Why? Why drag me into this? I had nothing to do with my father's actions. Margaret stepped forward, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. Your father's greed destroyed my family, she said, her tone laced with venom. I've spent decades rebuilding what he stole, and you're my final move. That's justice. Justice? Walter's voice rose with anger. This isn't justice, it's revenge. You've punished an innocent man for another's sins. Margaret's expression hardened. You're here because of him. If you want someone to blame, look at your father. Walter's fists clenched. Her words cut deep, but they also steeled his resolve. He wouldn't let her manipulations define his future. The time had come to fight back. Walter's mind raced as he paced the small library, clutching the incriminating diary he had taken from Margaret's locked room. Her words haunted him. "You're my final move." He needed help, someone he could trust. That night, he reached out to his closest friend from law school, David, who had always been sharp, resourceful, and fiercely loyal. David arrived at the estate 2 days later, under the guise of visiting an old friend. In the privacy of Walter's room, the two pored over the evidence: Margaret's diary, financial records, and the letters accusing Walter's father of ruinous deceit. David's brow furrowed as he examined the documents. "She's powerful, Walter," David said, his voice low. "These records show her involvement in shady dealings, even outright fraud. But exposing her won't be easy. She's covered her tracks well. But it's enough to start, right?" Walter asked, his voice tinged with desperation. David nodded slowly. "It might be, but you'll need to tread carefully. Margaret won't let go of her plans without a fight." Encouraged but wary, Walter began devising a plan. First, he and David organized the evidence into a secure digital file, backed up on multiple devices. Then, they contacted a trusted investigative journalist who had previously exposed high-profile scandals. Walter hesitated before hitting send on the email containing the documents. This was his lifeline, his escape route. But Margaret was always one step ahead. That evening, she confronted Walter in the grand dining hall. She stood at the head of the long table, her presence commanding and cold. "You think you can outmaneuver me?" she sneered, her sharp eyes locking onto his. "You're naive to believe the world plays fair." Walter's heart pounded, but he met her gaze with newfound determination. "Fairness starts with choosing not to stoop to your level, Margaret." Her lips curled into a sardonic smile. "You're playing a dangerous game, Walter. Do you even understand the forces you're dealing with? I've built this empire with my bare hands. You're a pawn trying to play king." Walter clenched his fists. "I'm no pawn, and I won't let you destroy what's left of my family for your revenge." Margaret's expression darkened. "You should be careful with your words. They could seal your fate." After she left, Walter's resolve only strengthened. He and David finalized the plan to expose her. The journalist agreed to publish the story within days, promising anonymity for Walter. On the eve of their next move, Walter stood on the mansion's balcony, staring into the night. His heart was heavy, but his conscience was clear. He had chosen his path, and there was no turning back. "We're ready," David said, joining him. "You've done the right thing?" Walter nodded. "I just hope it's enough to end this." As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Walter felt a flicker of hope. The battle ahead would be fierce, but he was no longer afraid. Margaret's grip on his life was loosening, and he was determined to break free. Walter walked into the police station with the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights pressing on his shoulders. In his hands, he clutched a neatly organized folder containing every piece of evidence he and David had collected: Margaret's incriminating diary, financial records, and documents linking her to fraudulent schemes. As he approached the officer at the front desk, he took a deep breath. "I have information about Margaret Hawthorne," he said firmly. Within hours, investigators began piecing together the threads of Margaret's calculated empire. Her web of deceit, carefully built over decades, started to unravel. Walter's evidence was undeniable, revealing a series of illicit deals and a vendetta that had fueled her every move. When the arrest warrant was issued, Walter stood on the mansion's grand staircase, watching as police officers escorted Margaret out in handcuffs. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, the commanding presence that had defined her seemed to falter. But then her lips curled into a faint, sardonic smile. "Revenge consumes, Walter," she said, her voice calm yet cutting. "Be careful it doesn't claim you too." Her words echoed in his mind long after she was driven away, leaving the mansion eerily silent. The reckoning he had fought for was finally here, but the victory felt hollow. Margaret's downfall wasn't just about justice. It was a window into the pain she had carried for so long. The trial that followed was swift but intense. Walter's testimony was pivotal, painting a vivid picture of Margaret's motivations and the lengths she had gone to exact her revenge. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with tension as Walter recounted the evidence. His voice wavered as he described the diary's entries, the letters to his father, and the calculated plan to use him as a pawn in her game. Margaret sat silently throughout the proceedings, her once imposing demeanor now subdued. When the verdict was read, sentencing her to a reduced term due to her age and lack of prior convictions, she finally spoke. "I've lost everything," she said, her voice steady but laced with weariness. "But perhaps that's what it takes to see clearly. To Walter, I say this: you were stronger than I expected. Don't let the past consume you like it did me." Walter left the courthouse feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Margaret's empire had crumbled, but so had the walls she had built around herself. Her parting words lingered, a reminder that justice and revenge were not the same. In the weeks that followed, Walter found himself reflecting on the events that had brought him to this point. He sold the Hawthorne estate, using the proceeds to clear his family's debts and create a scholarship fund in Margaret's late husband's name. It was a gesture of reconciliation, a way to honor the lives that had been shattered by greed and vengeance. As the days turned to weeks, Walter felt the weight of Margaret's final words begin to lift. He had chosen a different path, one that turned pain into purpose. And for the first time in years, he felt free. Months had passed since the trial, but the memories lingered in Walter's mind like shadows. When he received a letter from Margaret's estate lawyer, he was hesitant to open it. Inside, he found the unexpected. Margaret had arranged for him to inherit the mansion and its vast estate. It was a gesture that left him both puzzled and conflicted. Accompanying the inheritance was a handwritten letter from Margaret. Her familiar, elegant script filled the page. Asterisk Walter. I sought revenge, but found emptiness. My quest to right the wrongs of the past consumed me, leaving nothing but ashes in its wake. You showed me something I thought I'd lost, the strength of forgiveness. Use this gift to break the cycle of pain our families endured. Turn this estate into something that brings light instead of darkness. Margaret. Walter read the letter several times, her words resonating with a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. For all her scheming, Margaret had finally acknowledged the weight of her actions. Her choice to pass the estate to him felt like an olive branch, a way to atone for the damage she had caused. Determined to honor her final wish, Walter made a decision. The Hawthorne Mansion, a monument to Margaret's pain and ambition, would not remain a symbol of vengeance. Instead, it would serve as a beacon of hope. Walter sold the estate, and the proceeds were more than enough to clear his family's debts. With the remaining funds, he established the Harold Hawthorne Scholarship Fund, named after Margaret's late husband. The scholarship was designed to support students who had faced significant hardships, giving them opportunities that might otherwise have been out of reach. At the inaugural scholarship ceremony, Walter stood before a small crowd gathered in a modest auditorium. The air was charged with anticipation, and the faces of the first recipients beamed with gratitude. As he stepped up to the podium, he felt a surge of emotion. "This isn't just about healing wounds," he began, his voice steady but heartfelt. "It's about creating opportunities for second chances." The Hawthorne legacy was once defined by pain and loss, but today, it becomes a symbol of hope and resilience. This fund represents the belief that no matter where you come from, your future can be brighter. Applause filled the room, and Walter stepped back, his heart lighter than it had been in years. After the ceremony, he spoke with several recipients, their stories reminding him of why this work mattered. He saw in them the same struggles he had faced, and the same determination to rise above them. That evening, Walter walked through a quiet park near the auditorium, reflecting on how far he had come. Margaret's final words echoed in his mind. Turn this estate into something that brings light. She had trusted him to carry forward a legacy of change, and he had risen to the challenge. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Walter felt a deep sense of peace. The cycle of pain had been broken, and in its place, a new legacy had been born, one rooted in hope, compassion, and second chances.